Good morning, everybody. Oh, excuse me. That was a great start. Good morning, everybody. Here we are, Saturday morning, international show again.
I'll turn the phone off now then as well, Sean.
Yeah, good start. Good preparation there, Steve.
All started well.
Yeah, just to start very quickly, just one little question that came in. In fact, it was a telephone call from James Wyatt, who asked, do we always do these on a Saturday morning, considering the international distance and time zones? And I told him, yeah, we do, with the odd exception that we have to do one on a Friday night or a Sunday morning, subject to planning, etc. But in the main, Saturday morning, and he asked what was the planning, and I said, I don't go to sleep, and you have lots of sleep. So I think that's true again today. So for anybody who can see it, it's I haven't been to bed yet, and as you can see, Dorian Gray here looking as fantastic as he always does. So Stevie.
The reflection in your glasses, Chris, thankfully covers the eye bags.
That's it, mate. That's it. Right, another Saturday, Steve, and again, always positive, and keep people at least thinking that something good's happening everywhere. Getting a little bit more difficult now as we're getting into these winter months in certain parts of the world, and certain people not able to be able to keep to certain guidelines and rules. But with that in mind, myself and Salem, we've had an absolutely superb couple of weeks with the preparation for the ACHL digital event, and formally now just going to invite you to give a little recap of all of those sessions as part of it. So we'll be doing that next week, Steve. So I'm glad you're prepared to give us a bit of time. So Steve, bit of news and things that are happening during the week. What can we talk about? I've had one person who wanted to remain anonymous because they said they know you quite well and they know how enthusiastic and engaged you can get when you see something not being done that makes no common sense. So I'm assuming we're talking now about all of these quarantine issues up and down, and the fact that we've got to start testing.
Yeah, I think curious as to who that individual might well be. We gathered a few in my network over the years, Chris. But look, the reality is this: testing is getting much more of a run now than I think it has ever had in the preceding months of this pandemic. I think the reason is because we haven't seen the recovery to any degree of kind of forecast or plan. So. All of the forecasts, whether they came from airlines pumping out their own numbers or from industry bodies like IATA, have not come to fruition, and that's sad. But more than sad, actually, that's economic. It's continuing to cause liquidity issues with the carriers themselves. It is risking more and more livelihoods and people's jobs, and more broadly, it's impacting the economic recovery. Post-COVID. So I think there has been I wouldn't say kind of a light bulb moment. I think because in governments there are not many light bulbs that are generally switched on. The lights are normally off. Although we've seen some pretty active governments in recent months, but not for the right reasons. I don't say that sort of tongue in cheek, because I say that sort of genuinely. There is a real worry that governments have been asked to do a lot of work that they would never have, historically been, they may well have planned for but not engaged in. So I don't take that away from them. What I do think is that there has not been the support for this industry from the start. There's been lots of good words, there's been some rhetoric, and there's been some noise. But the noise has turned into white noise. It's been a bit of a distraction. Yeah. So I think what we're seeing now is the industry have realised. Some realised this early. I mean, there were players out there that sort of said, we've got to get on and do this. Nobody's going to give us a free pass here. We're going to have to fix this testing solution ourselves, or we're going to have to get the measures in place and communicate what those measures are to the customers early on ourselves. Government are not going to do that. IATA are a toothless tiger, so they generally don't get involved terribly much, or historically have not got involved a lot in this policy space. They've generally tried to lobby as a collective rather than sort of enforce as a rule maker. They've generally been rule takers from the likes of ICAO and from the Board of Governors. So I think what we're seeing now is airports and airlines standing up to get rid of this nonsensical quarantine that just does not make sense, that is continually harming people. I heard it described earlier this week as a blunt instrument. I think that's a very good definition for what quarantine is. I think there are far better alternatives, and the alternatives now that have come to the fore is test pre-departure, test a few days after arrival, knock out a few of the false negatives in terms of building some data and some of the history and the data aggregation that goes with it. Build your own portfolio, your own from an airline perspective, your own kind of intelligence around what this looks like, and use that then to lobby the governments and the regulators to see sense and bring this to the party, or come to the party with an open mind around actually replacing quarantine with a robust testing solution. I think I heard it described, Chris, this week, if you wouldn't mind, just sort of, indulging you for a minute or two in sort of the inner workings of the British Conservative Party are a unique beast. And the former Prime Minister, Mrs. May, this week, for the first time since look, for those that know, Mrs. May has a fantastic Home Secretary in my personal view, but an extremely weak Prime Minister that caved at every opportunity and didn't do her country, her citizens, or her party any justice. However, she stood up to be counted, and people listened to her this week in Parliament when she spoke so well about the need to get testing in place, that she does view this quarantine as a blunt instrument, that the ministers in the government lack some conviction. I'm sure she would have liked to say lack balls, because there's more balls and testicles in that government and that cabinet than there are under anything else. But she basically said, look, you lot, get on with it. Quarantine is a blunt instrument. Testing is the way forward. Yeah. We've got very bright minds, very bright bioscience firms here, very, very capable people working in laboratories and in the academic sector. That have developed tests. I mean, I was looking at one this week that has been tested and mentioned by John Holland Kay, the Virulence test, Heathrow, which they've now sent for certification or approvals or whatever that whole bureaucratic thing works like in government. And it's a saliva-based test that we mentioned before that they're doing some work up in Salford. The saliva test, Chris, has a 0.2% false negative rate, but conversely, on the trials that they've done, has got more than a 3% false positive rate. Now that ensures with that delta that you've got a range and you catch majority. So Mrs. May was saying, look, just allow the airports to use these. The British government don't even allow the airports to do this. And I think her line was basically for the fact there might be one false negative. Yeah. You are building a council of perfection that you continually. You can't get the economy restarted until you get aircraft flying again. And you can't get aircraft flying again until you get airports allowed to testing. Stop dragging your feet and just get on with it. So hats off to Mrs. May. I think she made a very good intervention this week. And it's right back to what we were saying is take the bull by the horns. Let's get testing in place. Let's agree. If we can't agree an all of industry or whole of industry solution at the outset, at least allow some of these large hubs that have got the capability, the science, the medical capability, the laboratory personnel, and the kind of not just the government. They want medical experts want 100% clinical excellence. Yeah. Of course, economists want every policy to favour the economy, and this is doing massive damage to the economy. The two are not mutually exclusive, Chris. Yeah. Health and economics. We have to actually find better balance and bring this back to the centre.
100%. And I'm glad that we indulged you there, Stephen. It was worthwhile. Now, as you know, I love a little slogan or acronym. And again, this business where Boris is now standing in front of clean face and space, and in my opinion, it should change. And I'd like to offer my services to you personally, Boris, because I think you should be standing now in front of something that says test, tell, and teach. Because once you introduce the testing, you tell people exactly what's going to happen, then start teaching people what the benefits of that particular process are so we can get some confidence back. Anyhow, test, tell, and teach. Boris, there's one for you, free of charge, my friend. Right, Stephen, now, other things that are happening. So you've got ACI Europe also advising that aviation is unsustainable if quarantine measures continue as they are. Yet, on the other side of the fence, you've got Germany now introducing quarantine instead of what they were doing with the testing. Where's the sense in that?
Well, this doesn't make sense, Chris. It's the same as, countries that were paying for quarantine for their citizens or their permanent residents to return home. They quickly realised, oh, that's not sustainable. That's going to cost a bloody fortune. So what we'll start doing is let's do a little bit of testing, or actually let's ask our people to pay. So we'll start paying, and the citizens make a bit of noise, and they say, well, actually, let's quarantine you at home.
Yeah.
Well, some of you ratbags don't follow the rules, and therefore you're breaking the rules, and therefore you're compromising the process. So what we'll do is we'll put you back into quarantine again, and you'll pay 3,000 Australian dollars, for example, for 14 days quarantine, which just sounds bloody ludicrous, rather than allowing airlines and listening to the advice from industry, because the science does not say, from my layman's view, again, we always caution our listeners to this program that we are not medical experts. But from a layman's perspective, and the work that we've been, or not the work, the reading and the reviews we've been doing this week around what testing is coming to market, this surely, testing coupled with a sensible quarantine regime, if required, is surely a much better way forward. So what Germany seems to have done is they say, oh, this testing that we introduced at the beginning, that was complex for us to operate and a bit difficult, a bit challenging. And actually, we've realised that testing travellers, for discretionary travel, is potentially taking away from those that need testing in the medical setting.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let's bring that hammer down, stop people travelling, and we'll put them back into quarantine under lock and key. I mean, that just makes no sense at all. So, look, I think, Germany have got to come to, Germany came to the party, Chris, at the beginning, very early on with this.
Very strongly,
Germany, Austria, Iceland, and others, were pretty strong on this testing front. The UAE is another one that's pretty strong on the testing front. So for that to regress is disappointing. But I think actually, what we've got to now do is, it's very clear that governments are very parochial.
Yep.
You're not on your morning stretch yet, Chris. So
just doing it.
Just doing it now. Excellent. Yep. For those not on with the video capability, Chris is just sort of doing a little is pre-workout warm up as we go through. I thought this sort of sparring was your workout or your warm up, Chris. But I think look, they've got to be complemented. There's got to be something better. But parochial governments want to be in control. They don't want industry bodies telling them what to do, and they certainly wouldn't want people from aviation telling them what to do. I think what a lot of people forget is, dependent whether you're in the full service carrier space or the low cost carrier, the GDP multiplier of aviation, it ranges between 2.5 to about 7 or 8. On the high end from a low cost carrier space in some parts of the world, but generally, I think IATA's numbers last year were in 2.5 a multiplier. What that means is actually aviation is a very valuable asset to governments, and I don't think government is treating aviation in the way that they ought to be doing. And I think that's a broad brush statement, but it applies to almost every single jurisdiction. You are allowing these jobs to be wasted, go down the pan, rather than actually look at this holistically, support some of your aviation workers, support the aerospace industry, and actually let's get people flying again and stop this negative media messages that you're pumping out from central government at your press conferences in Edinburgh or Cardiff or wherever you are every day. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Yep, and I think the general storm meant that they had to cover as many of the leaks as possible. And I think now they need to have a tactical approach. And one of the tactical pillars should be the aviation industry. And dare I say, some of the 3.5 billion or whatever it is that was misspent, misplaced or misdirected during the outpouring of funds should be reused for some of the tactical approaches that are necessary. So I think there's an opportunity there as well. Now, Steve, during the week, we had a podcast with a really, really dynamic lady, Elise Weber, and it's an Airbus-backed concept called Skytrax, And what they're actually doing is they're explaining, well, they explain to everybody about hedging. So everybody's aware of fuel hedging, but she's now talking about hedging your actual revenues and how you get transparency. Incredible amount of statistics that were available, and my goodness me, does she know her stuff. But she was focusing so much on 3DM, so data-driven decision making and the benefits and who's got access. And she was talking about the billions of individual data that they've got on passenger habits, spending. And one of the statistics was, you've got $1 trillion of the air travel industry generation in revenue, and 90% of the revenue is booked in less than 90 days. And what she was saying as well, and I pushed her on it, is something that you've been talking about, was in this short term, the amount of refunds and the way people are treated, especially by legacy carriers, will stand those legacy carriers in good stead with the way they respond to the customers in the future. Albeit that will probably be short term, because when everything comes back to an explosion, which I think will happen as soon as either the vaccines kick in or everybody realizes the risk is low enough, it's going to go mad again. So IATA are already suggesting as well that they will return to a V curve. What's your opinions on that?
Well, I was having a discussion with a client yesterday, funnily enough, for some modelling that we'd been involved in April. And, we'd use a lot of the indicators that had come out of the likes of IATA in terms of the recovery. And, 24 hours, probably less, 12 hours after each of those forecasts were published to the client, Chris, they're all out of date.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very difficult to predict. I think we saw, I was looking at some of the, a firm that many of you will know called CAPA, Centre for Aviation, based down in Sydney. And they held the Australian Summit this week, which was really interesting, with keynote speakers like Alan Joyce and Akbar Al-Bakr, amongst others, Paul Scurr, etc., from Virgin Australia. And they were sort of, each of them, I think, whilst Qatar has maintained a presence and maintained a presence. I mean, each of the three, airline CEOs were saying that every forecast that they've done internally or revised weekly is all gone by the wayside. So I think very difficult to predict, Chris. I think we saw VFR and leisure travel returning first. I think that's true. I think that's what we are seeing. I think what I'm hoping for is that, and we've seen it with these air corridors. Yeah. These air corridors are so unpredictable, so unpredictable. And you know that I don't have any sympathy for somebody that books a flight on leisure that ends up being caught out by a quarantine restriction. Well, that as I said before, that's just tough luck. There's not much whinging you can do. That's the way these things work. What I do think is more about is there's got to be smarter ways to manage these air corridors.
Yeah.
So air corridors, including things like a testing capability, Air Corridor Plus, if you wish, would certainly help give more certainty and continuity to the presence of air corridors to re-establish some of that travel back in there. Therefore, that will help us, I suspect, pick up some of the curve. Because what we have seen is a resurgence in travel demand, that latent demand that was suppressed.
At
the height of the pandemic. As soon as we could get out of the front door, we were off.
Yep.
We're sort of how fast where can we go? Where's got no quarantine to return? Well, of course, now those doors are starting to close again. So I think there's got to be a better way of doing that. So yeah, very difficult to predict. The one thing I would say, just to, as we mentioned, Qatar Airways there, and we touched on Qatar Airways last week.
Yes, we promised the chief that there'd be a little bit of an update, and Mr. Akbar, when he does his press releases and his comments, he can be quite direct, he can be challenging, but to be fair to him, and now I think you're going to now endorse some of the positives that have happened.
I think Qatar. Look, Qatar Airways have been a real stalwart and a very good friend to many of the travelling public, Chris, during this pandemic. And so I doff my hat to Mr. Al-Bakr and all of his team, because what they have done is, one, they allowed me to return to Malaysia because there are very few alternative options to get back to Malaysia. They're allowing many Australians to get back into their country despite these ridiculous caps that they've got. And actually, you're very right, Mr. Al-Bakr was in the press yesterday saying if Australia does not remove the caps, he will stop flying to Australia. Now, if I were in Canberra in the lodge or in Government House, I would be starting to get a little bit nervous about that, because I've already taken quite a lot of flack, from my citizens who are stranded overseas. So, Qatar Airways, to be fair, have stood up and supported their customers in a time of need. And I think they've also managed that. We spoke earlier about living by the sword, dying by the sword.
Yeah.
That analogy we've used a few times. We didn't mention it earlier, but that's what we said around treating your customer with care and respect and dignity and offering them those refunds. They have done that, as well as mobilized. Remember the armada of 777 freighters, Chris, that we saw, that we were discussing privately, that were mobilized, the first 2 or 3 weeks of the pandemic, off to China the irony, off to China to collect masks, but to collect PPE and serve the world. So, Qatar Airways have been a good friend to many people during this crisis, and I'm sure that will be remembered by many of those that have been helped out by Qatar during this.
Yeah, and it's ironic as well, because lots of people that I know, and obviously social circles, etc., have got nothing to do with aviation. One of the things they always kept saying to me was, every time we do see a plane, and especially when it was restricted, they kept seeing Qatar written underneath, and they said, "How can that be?" And so, fair play to them; they've done very well. Also, now it looks the selection or the strategy of equipment and why has also come to their benefit as well. So it looks like another good choice.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, as you know, I said that to you, Chris. Our apartment in London is under the approach for the northerly runway on the 27 right. So each occasion I was sitting on the terrace. It was Qatar. It was absolutely right. But certainly hats off to them for sure.
So there's a nice shout out there for Qatar. So hopefully the people that we've got absolutely no link to, Wizz Air, will also not be too miffed, because they're also going to get another shout now. So Abu Dhabi, so they've delayed that until October, which I think is understandable, but they're still pushing their fleet development, and now they're looking at going into Romania. So wherever they see opportunities, it's also going to put challenges to the existing carriers that are in those markets.
Well, I think I saw this week, and again, one disagrees with Joseph Varady very cautiously, but once again, I can only agree with his statement this week that as his business has done, it sought out the opportunities, Chris, that were potentially not as easy to access before, for example, or a little more challenging to sort of get into, or there were a few more barriers to entry. But with a very few barriers to entry now, Wizz Air have sought those opportunities and acted on them and delivered back into those markets really, really quickly. And Joseph's point was, this is about survival of the fittest. The fittest tends to be the low-cost carriers, and it's the low-cost carriers that will now seize these opportunities and go forth. He didn't quite say, a question around the legacy carriers, continued viability, but certainly legacy carriers operations on regional short-haul routes in Europe. I think the days for that, unless people are hubbing through there on Fifth Freedom or connecting through multiple sectors, are gone. And so I think Wizz Air, EasyJet, Ryanair are the ones that will capitalise those opportunities, and rightly so. And Romania is an example there. Romania has a very weak state-owned carrier, Tarom, that has not been profitable for the last 10 years.
Yeah,
Cost the government a lot of money, cost the Romanian taxpayer a lot of money. Tarom and Blue Air have both been given funds from the Romanian government, despite essentially trading negatively for such a long time. And Wizz Air sort of nipping through the back door and pick up some slots in Otopeni and other places, like Iași and others in Romania, and make the most of it. So good on them if they can do that. Great. Somebody that Joseph built Wizz Air from scratch, and people should be very proud of what Wizz Air have achieved. And I think for that market, Central Eastern Europe, and now going beyond, it's a very, very good carrier, great discipline, and will go very far.
Yeah. So Joseph, again, I'm hoping somebody's going to tell you what's been going on. We're still waiting for the baseball caps and T-shirts. Anyhow, now getting back to the bookings and the amount of changes. Obviously now and again, our sort of caveat or disclaimer: we're not experts when it comes down to medical terms. Some people say we're not experts when it comes down to anything, but we do like to talk about topical issues. So with regards to the bookings, interesting to see Virgin now introducing the unlimited booking changes up until January 2021. So that shows, I think there's, everybody's understanding and appreciating this next 4 to 6 months is going to be critical now with what people do consistently, with how certain opportunities to keep the businesses going are maintained and agreed amongst as many people as possible. Another personal opinion is some of these league tables now, with how parties are doing on hygiene issues, that shouldn't be a competitive issue. It should be something that is seen as, if people are leading in the right direction, everybody else should get on board quickly so that consumers can see a huge amount of confidence. And when you start looking now at the indicators, so you got Singapore again now announcing 4,300 job cuts domestically and internationally. There's going to be a lot more tougher news with this practical sizing that's going to take place over the next 3 to 6 months. So very, very tough. Now, Unite, another favourite of yours, okay, still in negotiations. And this business about test, tell, teach, I think there needs to be more awareness and more open communication, just explaining to people that in crisis times like this, some of these practical decisions that have to be made, and where some of the central practical decisions have been made, everybody associated with that particular industry and what lies below it, what is affected left and right and above it, people need to understand what is going to happen and for how long. And in some cases, the quicker it happens, the better. And I just feel for so many people that have been given wrong information, or people feel that, for solidarity and to stand firm, you're going to get a better decision. Well, you're not, because money is flooding out of most industries now. And it's such a crying shame that this tell and teach side after the testing isn't being supported from a central, credible perspective.
Well, I think a couple of things there. I mean, centrally, everybody's, sort of not centrally, on a macro level, everybody is sort of aware of, how challenging this crisis has been to many industries and to many sectors. More micro level relative to our industry, I think the challenge we've got, Chris, is, and we said this very early on, there still is this distrust between the employee groups and the employer, between the trade unions and the management and negotiation table. There still exists this perception that government can intervene in private sector, private businesses. Doesn't exist. That they cannot intervene if companies are following the law. If they're not following the law, it's a different story, and it's for the judiciary to intervene, not government. So that sort of these clouds around this sort of this mystique, or this sort of disbelief that the industry is on its knees. I mean, I'm not sure that even if we gave every union delegate or every union leader or every employee access to the full P&Ls and the full balance sheets, right up to this present day, including the cash flow statements, and seeing the cash outflow on all these businesses, I'm still sure they would find a way to say that somebody's telling them a lie, or somebody's not telling them the truth. And those are two different things, by the way. Somebody's telling a lie, not telling the truth. I make a distinction. Yeah. Telling a lie is really bad, but not telling the truth is less bad. Sorry, I say that tongue in cheek, but I see this point. The point is, we said at the beginning, Chris, that there has to be some way of informing the employees. Now, maybe the unions have got access to all the information. Maybe they're just taking a stand. I can't blame them. They should take a stand. It's right that they take a stand. because the employer should not be using COVID-19 as a lever or tool to affect changes to employment terms and conditions that they would never have considered before. What they should be able to do, the employer and the employee, is discuss the massive catastrophic impact of COVID-19 on their business and share the immediate impact, the short term, the medium and the long term kind of sort of negative scenarios around that, best case scenario to worst case, and really try to get some. Now, a lot of good businesses will be doing that already, but I suspect a lot of them hide behind confidentiality, or we can't share this, or and I think that's really not the right way to do this. So, but equally, having your MP stand up in Parliament, and try to protect your job isn't the right way either. Maybe more fool the MP, but I do feel that there is still a feeling out there that, oh, well, it's not quite as bad as you're making it out to be. Well, actually, my friend, it really is, and we've really got to act now. However, if we are able to restore capacity in 2, 3, 4 years' time, then we'll have a list available of good long-term, employees with a good standing and good relationships that remain with us, and you'll be first to get back in the door. But this standing on picket lines and starting to it will just exacerbate an already very bad situation. There's so the water is, the analogy uses, water is flooding out, the cash is flooding out like water, through the dam, and then you go and sort of drop a bomb on the dam. Well, that's a whole bloody thing going. That's exactly what they're trying to do with this kind of regressive action that rests in Arthur Scargill's 1970s, not in a progressive nation's 2020.
No, I agree. And sometimes you have to make a stand in life, in business, to look after people.
Of course,
that's clear. But sometimes if you do the chest puffing too soon, my goodness me, you can live to regret it big time.
And make a fool of yourself.
I keep saying about this, teach and tell is so important. And something that a gentleman that as well, Andy Clemson, he was talking about, the first thing that you cut, marketing, training, etc. So he was doing his bit there, which was great. But he did talk a lot of sense. And what he was saying is, now if people focus on the people that they're going to require as leaders moving forward, because of so much experience that's going out of the business now because of voluntary redundancies, etc., whatever the displacement is, people that are going to be remaining are going to have to take on more responsibility. So to take on responsibility, if you know why, is much more powerful. So some of the training built around clarity and control, is something that maybe organizations should start looking at in the short term. So that's your pitch there, Andy. I've given that one. Now, coming back to, to the issues that we've discussed now. And again, just quickly, the Airlines UK, they again have been very vocal about supporting the aviation cause and using it as tactical support now within the business, which is, I think, should be looked at. But something that's also now coming up, and it's an obvious thing. IATA have been saying that, freighter demand is very high. Well, there's a surprise. But of course it is. But an interesting thing now is, and if you look at DB Schenker's, so their charter flights and other people now looking at getting involved in their own charters, the charter business is going to go through the roof in the next 6 to 7 months. So I
think I see a pivot. We'll see a pivot, Chris.
Yes, that segment is going to.
Shall we buy a couple of 747s?
There you go, mate. Everybody else is pushing them away, but the old freighter, the old family favourite is going to be so important now moving.
I think this excites you.
Of the Praetor conversion and the adaptability or agility there, but freighters now they're going to have a purple patch again for the next 6 or 7 months.
I think the thought of that excites you, and I think for good reason. The one thing I would say, I did also see this week, and that we spoke 2 weeks ago, I think, Chris, about the logistics around the vaccine distribution. I spoke a lot to the last mile, and you were sort of talking about air cargo capacity, touching on that today.
And
I think
airports.
I read earlier this week that IATA had suggested that to provide vaccines for the world would take 777 freighters.
Yeah, mentioned that on the show as well, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. And for people to appreciate the logistics involved, and they're not even, everybody's not sure now whether it's going to be deep frozen, whether it's going to be 2 to 8, what it's going to be. But when you look at what happened with the PPE, there's going to be so much coming in. And now airports need to consolidate to see whether their airport ecosystem has got the capability to store and distribute and how to get it. So there's so much collaboration and coordination that needs to go on now. And that's come out from all of the discussions that we've had with airports and GHAs, the need for this collaboration, and perhaps for airports to take a more focused overview or leader with regards to the capabilities of their particular areas. But that's lovely. Keep nodding. That's the first time I think there's been a nod without a comment. So I love that one.
I'm sorry. My son has just arrived, Chris. You might have heard in the background, and that's why I was on mute. I'm not mute, and it wasn't a moot point, but that's why. So my apologies.
No, that's no problem. Talking about that, and we used to do a tip of the day. Here's a tip for everybody. If you're doing something on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever, make sure the skylights in the facility that you're in are closed suitably. Because I had some people doing something with me and they left one of the skylights open. And right in the middle of doing a session, a bird flew in. And my God, the bird was more frightened than I could have imagined and made the biggest mess. And it took me ages to get the damn thing out. So be aware of your skylights, everybody, in this last of the hot weather. Now, back to something that's quite, I had a little bit of a smile on the side. Well, Wuhan, Tian Airport, okay, resuming limited international scheduled flights from next week, from the 16th. I just found that ironic.
Yeah, look, I've seen. China, I think, Chris, has restored. I don't know fully. I can't quote the number, but certainly there's some very positive news coming out of China in terms of their domestic capacity being restored, if not to pre-COVID levels, very, very close to pre-COVID levels. So of course, with a country the size of China and population size of China, that's a strong sort of attribute they've got. They can redeliver the domestic market. Interesting then that international is reopening, because I thought, and as you know, I'm a bit of a cinephile, so I like all things, not all things China. I like most things China. I don't like well, actually, it's a different podcast where we could describe Mao Zedong or Deng Xiaoping's policies and the lasting effects in China. However, the Chinese
Stephen, I'm sure people will be riveted to that one when it comes out, mate. I might not be part of it.
Well, for my politics and political science at school, I wrote a thesis. You wouldn't have guessed that I did politics. No interest in politics at all.
There's a shot.
But I wrote a thesis that my thesis was on Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong. And so I could do a separate session for that. I'm going to have to talk to Salim and find a host that would be willing to host that one rather than just that one.
Yeah, one that's still alive, Steve.
But look, interesting. China remains closed internationally because to most people.
Yep.
So this is start moving Chinese around, I suspect, which is makes sense. But yes, there is a slight tinge of irony there. But yeah, well, we hope that there's no, thankful that there was no massive second wave in China, because I think that could have been pretty catastrophic if that was the origin of ground zero was Wuhan, and that we may never know.
Yeah. So irrespective of the stories, how and why, and should the Chinese New Year allowed so many people to move, etc., all those things, that'll come out in the wash. But one of the things that I think is important now, people are now looking at their own personal situations, and the business with the steps and your watch and Fitbits and everybody getting their 10,000 in, and if you're at 8,000, chase the dog around the garden for a little while to get your 10,000, or up and down your own steps. So, but people are a lot more focused now. And we've got a podcast coming out next week with a company called Vast Minds. And they've done even more technology. Great video. And it's not about having a panacea for COVID, but what it is it's about giving yourself early indicators of things that might not be right with your own well-being. It's great. I think anybody that gets the chance to listen in, please do. And I am promoting it because I see so much value in it. So before we come to the end of this week's show, Stephen, what I would just like your diplomacy, your energy, your engagement, just to flood out now that your juices are flowing. What I don't understand, my friend, we've been speaking about clarity, making a very crisp, clear decision. Boris has found his balls, and for whatever reason, 6 is the number. Okay, now Boris says 6. North of the border, it's not including children below 12. How can we still be having so many differences in such a small blooming group of countries like the United Kingdom? What good does that do now when it gives media the opportunity again to focus on the negatives and to start saying, why is it here? Why is it there? Instead of everybody for once just saying the next 6 to 7 months are going to be crucial for everybody. If something is happening, it's because of scientific indicators, okay, the R rate, whatever. If something is happening, this is what's going to happen. This is what you must do. We're at least getting to that understanding that you need to be clear in your policies or in your actions, and that there must be repercussions. Why
I think, Chris, the problem has less to do with the medical experts and much more to do with the politicians. I think the group of, for those not in the UK, it's a bizarre scenario. We do have devolved administrations. I have a personal view about whether they should exist or not. But those devolved administrations do have some powers devolved from Westminster. The 4 chief medical officers of the UK, Chris, do sit together, as I understand from reading government papers, and they do regularly agree. The problem is that when it goes to their political masters,
yes, they want to get this one-upmanship.
And so Nicola is using this to be hell-bent on her Scottish independence agenda.
Yeah.
Our friend in Wales, down in the valleys in Cardiff, he is that was a terrible Welsh accent, so maybe we should stick to it.
I think so. Steve, you've been operating under a terrible Scottish accent for so long, mate. Don't worry about it.
But I think Mr. Drayford down in Cardiff, First Minister of Wales, I think they've got their own agendas, their own issues with the current performance of NHS Wales. Yeah. We know the challenges with Northern Ireland. Actually, to be fair to the Northern Ireland administration, that's only just been reconstituted again. I think they've been trying as much as possible, Chris, to align with both the mainland, the Great Britain, and the Republic, because of course there is a need to maintain political sensitivity because of the let's just say the previous there. So I think none of this is to do with medical science. It doesn't just apply in the UK, because the same thing is happening in Australia. I mean, WA and Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, which has turned into this communist state these days, where nobody can go out, massive curfews, everything's locked down. Dan Andrews is just being abomination to the good people of Victoria. I used to live in Victoria for a few years, so I feel very, very, very saddened by that. And then you see the same in the US as well, Chris. So how the hell then, when you think about the political landscape and sort of global bodies like WHO that still don't seem to have any balls, the UN doesn't seem to have many balls, the EU can't get the 27 members to agree to anything, and within their own borders, the country borders. So what in good likelihood or probability is there that the aviation industry can get its act together to agree? 190 countries, I just think we are living in cloud cuckoo land. What we need is a few first movers to take the bull by the horns get even, airport to airport agreements, or, country to country or region to region, or whatever you've got to do, but at least get some movement and some traction behind it, because government ain't going to do it. It's going to rely on private sector, rely on some brains and boffins and labs and science and units, and let's get this world and the economy moving again.
Yeah, and the likes of IATA, ICAO, everybody, all regulatory and representative bodies, they're all now being pressured with practical sizing, so they're losing some expertise. This is now a great opportunity for them all to come together, agree on the most critical points that need to be addressed, and start pumping out. And again, I come back to test, tell, and teach. People need to be told why things are happening, nice and simply, and people need to be taught how to deal with those issues when they're implementing into their own businesses under very tough decisions, i.e. losing colleagues, whether it's voluntary, whether it's necessity, and for how long, and how do they keep people motivated and understanding that there's going to be some more adjustments coming over the next 6 to 7 months. And subject to how well that's put in place, that gives a much better collective opportunity for success when we come out of this, because there probably will be a huge explosion of demand.
I really hope so,
because of the general population and people issues. So anyhow, my friend, I think we've done that. The only one
comes the end of another week.
Yeah, we covered a few of that. We covered questions from Jim, Stuart, and obviously we gave a shout to Andy, Vast Minds, the Chief in Qatar, and also Wizz Air. And for anybody,
you're giving away that there's a bit of an aid memoir there in front of you.
Yeah, no, it's like I've got a few things written down on a stamp, and it's just I've got a good memory. And it works every now and again. But the most important thing is anybody that's goes to the trouble of sending something in to be covered. I like to, of course, make sure that they're mentioned. Steve, look after yourself over the next week. It's always a pleasure, and glad you had so much sleep. So you're always energetic. I'm a little bit concerned what's going to happen now when you get back to Europe when we're on the same time zones.
That'll be hopefully if I'm looking at the calendar, 12th September. I should be the 28th of September. So just over 2 weeks time. Just over 2 weeks time.
Okay, welcome back. You looking forward to it?
I think I am. I'm still working out the logistics of my return and approvals and the like, but Malaysia remains closed even to residents. So if you leave during lockdown, it's a one-way ticket, is what they say. But there are exceptions, and you go through the normal channels. You apply online to immigration, and there's a fair bit of work, as you well know, Chris, for us to pick up in the UK and do, and therefore it's important that I get back. But equally, it's important that we follow the procedures and follow the SOPs. We can't be sitting here talking to others about just wear the bloody mask and that kind of ilk when if I'm trying to escape Malaysia without the right approval. So I will go through that process, and that should happen.
Yeah, no, rules are made for a reason, and if they need to...
Rules is rules, as they say.
The process to change them as well, yeah. Anyhow, mate, take care of yourself.
Great.
It was a pleasure. Look forward to next week. I will go to bed early every night so it comes quicker.
And there was me thinking you were doing an all-nighter.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I won't be doing that very often again, I'll tell you. Anyhow, take care. All the best.
Happy weekend. See you.
Yeah, you too. Cheers.